Welcome to The Alignment Show, featuring conversations with folks who have taken steps to identify their highest values and align their lives around them. Time on this earth is not unlimited, and you may be seeking to make sure you spend your time on things that matter to you. These conversations will encourage you and support you in doing so. Now, let's meet this week's guest on The Alignment Show. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Welcome once again to The Alignment Show. I'm your host, Don King, and it's my privilege pretty much every week, a couple of times a month, I get to have conversations with people who help you and me figure out how to live our values so we can value our lives. And we've got a great conversation with us today. I'll tell you about Lois Creamer here in just a moment. Want to start out, though, by reminding you about our hosts. The next edition, I guess you would say, of Sales Wise Live will be coming up the 1st of April. They're doing them virtually these days, which means you don't have to worry about hopping on a plane, getting through an airport, traveling anywhere. Well, why would you want to do that? Whether it's in person or virtually, the folks at SalesWise Live really are about helping you to develop effective relationships. If you think of sales as being something manipulative, trying to back somebody in a corner, forcing them to buy, that's not effective salesmanship. That's just frustrating. It's not very lucrative. You can, as Ben Franklin said, you can do well by doing good. And the approach that Bob Berg and Jeff West, Kim Angeli take is to help you to develop a lucrative career while serving people, helping folks. I mean, I can't think of a more satisfying way to make a living. So I've got a QR code up there on the screen. Let's see if we can move that over to the side. Yeah, there we are. SalesWise Live. You can always get to them by going to donking.com/saleswise, and I will put that up occasionally in the crawl down at the bottom. Make it easy for you to see. And for those of you on audio only, check it out, donking.com. That's DONNKING.com/saleswise. Also, this show is brought to you as usual by Don King's books. I've got on the screen a QR code for a free short story to get a sample. It's sort of like cheese samples, I always say. Writing Home is a short story that gives you a sense of the style. I would love for you to check it out. No obligation whatsoever. And if you are on with us audio only, you can get that at donking.com. That's DONNKING.com/free writing home. It's a short story about the real final frontier. I think you will enjoy it. You can also just simply check out my books at donking.com/books. That'll show you all of them. But if you want that cheese sample, then check out donking.com/free writing home. So let's see. We want to get that QR code off of there. There we go. Let me tell you a little bit about today's guest. When I set up the promo, I said we had known each other for over 30 years. And Lois let me know it wasn't quite that long. She said over 20. It's somewhere between 20 and 25. I got to know Lois as she was just starting on her business. And even in those early days, she was already having such an impact. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that among professional speakers, there's hardly anyone who has had more of an impact on the industry than Lois Creamer. Now, a running joke between the two of us, her last name is spelled Creamer, and that has been um, so much a part of my existence professionally for the last several years. I told my wife one time I was got to go to the grocery store. I need to get some coffee creamer. Uh, that's just a minor thing, but it shows how much she's in my mind like that. And you may have not heard of her, but wow, what a pulse she has! Not just on the professional speaking business, but on how to effectively sell yourself, which is something we all have to do to establish trust, to make connections. She is very wisely focused on professional speaking. She no longer speaks on sales in general, but boy, does she know how to do it. And so we're very glad to have her on the show today. It's amazing that I have the privilege of being connected to her. She wrote the Bible of speaker marketing called Book More Business, Make More Money. And she's released a second edition recently, so we'll be talking about that book. But I've talked enough about Lois. Let me just let you get to know Lois directly, and let's go ahead and bring on Lois Creamer here on the Alignment Show. So, as I just introduced, folks, we are happy to have Lois Creamer here since we're recording separately from me introducing. I'm not 100% sure what I said about Lois, so I just want to reiterate that, in my view, Lois is the queen of public speaking. She wrote what I would consider to be the Bible for professional speakers. And I was fortunate enough to get to know her years ago when I was doing professional speaking. I'm very pleased to have maintained these connections over the years. So, Lois, welcome to the Alignment Show.
Don, it's so good to be with you today, and I appreciate all the nice things you have to say about me. And I'm just honored to be your guest.
Well, and you are a writer as well. And so, the latest thing that you have done is to do an update to what I would consider to be the Bible of professional marketing, speaker marketing. And we're going to talk about those in just a bit, but I also want to give folks a bit of a background. And so, what I know about you is that years ago, you started in sales that had nothing to do with speaking. I think you worked in the steel industry. Am I
I
remembering
did.
that correctly? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I've never thought to ask you, how did you get started selling steel?
Uh, Somebody offered me a job right out of college, and I took it. And it was in sales and marketing for United States Steel Corporation, district sales office here in St. Louis. And it was a great job. They spent a lot of money training me on sales, Don.
Okay.
And they did so not because they saw great promise in me. They did so because I was a woman. And at the time, they needed to invest in women.
Mm,
Regardless of the motive, I reaped the benefits
okay.
because I learned a lot. And I recognized during that time that if I didn't stay there and use this information, it would always be helpful to me down the road. And indeed, it has been. So that's how I started. I worked in corporate sales and marketing. And then I left when my husband and I adopted a little baby because my most favorite job in the world is mom. And I wanted to be a full-time mom for a while. And I had the luxury of doing that. So that's how I got in to the steel business and how I got out of the steel business.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Now, just a quick contextual question here, I guess. Um, that would that have been in the 1970s, 80s, roughly?
Getting out of the steel business in the 80s.
80s. Okay. So I first was learning about sales in the mid 70s to late 70s. And without putting any specific names out there, a lot of the sales training was, as I would look at it now, was basically how to back a prospect into a corner so that they
You're right.
couldn't say no.
You're,
Um,
you're absolutely right.
Was that the kind of sales approach that you learned at that time? Or
I think that sales was less relational back then. And so I learned, interestingly, I learned what I didn't like
mm,
about selling. And I also learned what worked for me. And relational selling is what has worked for me. I've been in sales, in and out of sales my entire life. Don, I say I started as an entrepreneur. When I was 11, I walked dogs for people in the neighborhood
mm,
who had jobs and needed their dogs taken out after my school was out. I would go over, take the dog for a walk, and I would get paid for it. I was paid pretty well.
yeah.
And that was my first journey into being an entrepreneur. I didn't recognize that's what I was then. But I was literally selling. I went around the neighborhood and told people, I like to walk dogs after school. If your dog needs to be walked, let me know. I'll put you on my schedule.
There you go. Okay.
And Don, I'll tell you, I remember at the time I did this because I wanted to raise money for contact lenses.
Mm,
And my father had said, well, we've got 4 kids here. I can't afford contact lenses. And at the time, Don, they were $150. And
okay.
he said, but if you raise half, I'll pay half. And he said, what seemed like days later, I approached him with $75 cash from my dog walking business.
Ah,
And my mother remembers him saying, this is not in our budget, but we have to do it.
mm-hmm.
And so that's how I started realizing I liked making my own money and what it could do for me. And that's when I really bought into the whole premise of relational selling, which, as you know, is my belief today.
Hmm. Yes. Yes. And it's one of the things, one of the earliest things that I connected with you about because of those values. So many of us think of sales as being a kind of scammy sort of thing, taking advantage of people. And that's never been your approach. I mean, you did not go up to those first people and say, would you give me some money so I can walk your dog? I mean, you were thinking in terms of serving their needs. Is that accurate?
I think sales, when we're in sales, we're in the meeting needs business. And it's finding people who need what you're selling. And then after that, it becomes, do you think I'm a fit for what you want to accomplish?
Mm,
For over 20 years, this is how I've run my business. If you need what I have and we're a match, then I think it may make sense for us to work together. And I want to see if you think so too. But I think it's matching a need with expertise.
hmm hmm
And that's what I think professional speakers do. They look at a client's need and say, do I have the expertise to match what they want to accomplish?
And it's not only more ethical, it's more satisfying,
Oh,
and
yes.
it's more lucrative.
Well, I think it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that um, first, I always, what dictates good sales to me, Don, is what appeals to me. I
Mm,
don't like to be poked, prodded, and pushed.
yeah.
Um, and I have had a mantra for over 20 years in my business. I never talk anybody into working with me. And so if I feel like we're over talking, I will actually say at this point, I feel like you want me to talk you into working with you, and I don't do that. I'm either a fit or I'm not.
Mhm.
And if I'm not, I'm happy to give you a resource if I can. But I think it's just the meeting needs business. I really do.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, not only just in a logical sense, a money making sense, but in a life satisfaction sense.
Yes. And that counts for me. You and I run our own businesses. I run my business to create the kind of joy I want in my life, quite frankly.
Hmm.
And the longer I've run it, the more I realize that that is just as important to me as making money. More important to me, probably at this stage of my business, quite frankly.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I like doing what I love to do, but I only want to do it. I always say, Don, this isn't a hostage situation to my client.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And
and just to kind of turn it over in a sense, there are people who believe that the only way to make money is to take advantage of people. And that's one reason I really like to emphasize when we have folks like you on the program that you have not only done something that feels good, that satisfies you, that brings joy into your life, but you're making a good living doing so. There is no
Yes.
contradiction there.
I mean, I've been very, very lucky. And, but I'll tell you, I think for anyone who is selling a service, it only makes sense to work with sure things.
Mm.
I don't want to work with people who are not going to get what I'm trying to give them. And I have such a niche business working with professional speakers. I always say I swim in a small pond and I can't afford to have unhappy people.
Mm. Yeah.
And so that's why I'm very choosy about who I work with, that I'm the perfect fit for what they want to accomplish.
Indeed, indeed. And I want to be sure for our listeners who may not be familiar with you, to be clear on what you do. But before we get there, let's continue that origin story a little bit. You told us how you got into steel and how
Yep.
you got out of it. And if you started 11 years old as an entrepreneur, but you didn't realize you were an entrepreneur at the time, when you were 15, 16 years old, what did you think you would do when you graduated high school or got out of college?
I always thought I would teach.
Okay.
I majored in history. I love history.
Mhm.
Spent some formative years living right outside of Gettysburg, in Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
which really I know is what really created this interest, lifelong interest for me. I thought I would teach. The teaching market was glutted with speakers. I had to leave right before I got my diploma. My father died. I couldn't afford to stay there and finish, unfortunately. But I'll tell you, I have been fortunate, fortunate. I got this great opportunity. Then I stayed home with Maggie for a number of years. And then a college friend of mine called me and said, I have a professional speaker who is in an office next to me in an office suites, and he's looking for somebody to run his business. And I told him all about you. You're in sales and marketing, and he's going to call you. And I remember thinking, well, I wish you hadn't. And so I got a call and we talked. He was looking for somebody full time. I said, that's not me. But he was very interesting, really nice guy. And I said, I wish you good luck. You sound like a great guy. Name is Shep Hyken, former past president of National Speakers Association. And I said, you sound like a great guy. Good luck. 10 minutes later, he called me back and he said, would you agree to have lunch with me? And Don, I thought, it would be good for me to have lunch with somebody because I'd been out of the job market for 10 years. So I did, going thinking this is going to be good experience for me. We talked about it. He said, what would you need in order to come back into the job market? And I told him, and he said, would you like to give it a try? And I thought, okay, he's 10 minutes from my house. And I thought, okay, let's do it. And it didn't take us long before we knew this was a good match. But I knew nothing about the speaking industry at that time. In fact, when he said he was a professional speaker, my reply was, you're kidding. You can do that? You can do that? I mean, I was totally dumbfounded that you could do that. And but I learned at the feet of the master. He's incredibly successful, is out there today, even more successful, Speaker Hall of Fame member. And I got some great opportunities from the National Speakers Association, who asked me to speak to other speakers about how to sell themselves while I was still employed there. And that's when I started getting an idea. I wonder if there could be a business in this for me on my own. And so I decided that I would give it a try. And lo and behold, I've never looked back since then. That was 1998.
Okay. And that was about the time you and I connected, I think.
Yes, we've been connected for a long time.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the first, I didn't realize at the time, but it's probably one of the first chapters that you were speaking to in
Yes,
Tennessee.
down in Tennessee. I went to that chapter a few times before it closed because you just didn't have enough to keep it up, and you varied the meetings between Nashville and Memphis. And I spoke at both.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's how we first met.
Somewhere I still have the 3-ring binder that has the roots that became that book that I consider to be the Bible. And so we'll get to that in just a second. I got to ask a curiosity question. Did it happen that Shep was your first client after you went out into business for yourself?
No, he wasn't. Uh, he was he was and still is my biggest business booster
There
since
we
I've
go.
been
Yeah.
out on my own. But he wasn't my first client. My first client was actually another Speaker Hall of Fame member who was in one of my breakouts that I did for NSA.
Hmm.
And I worked with her, and then I started my 2-day programs. I started, listen, I remember thinking, I don't even know what to do. A mastermind group was nice enough to invite me in here in St. Louis, a mastermind group early on. And I remember saying, I don't even, what do I charge? I don't even know what to do. And
Mhm.
and Don, who this gentleman who's still a dear friend of mine said, you need to charge $50 an hour. This was in 98. And
Mhm.
I said to get $50 an hour, I would have to have pantyhose over my face and a gun in my hand. Nobody's going to pay me $50 an hour. So he said, that's what you need to do. They all agreed. So I went out, I emailed everyone I had ever met through NSA. And I said, I'm starting up a business. This is my hourly fee. If I can help you, let me know. I got business right away.
Mm.
We met every 6 weeks. 6 weeks, I went back. I said, unbelievably, nobody blinked.
Wow. Okay.
And they said, that's good because your fee is $75 an hour. And they kept doing this.
You keep
And
going until somebody blinks. Is that pretty much in a
keep
way?
going until you meet some kind of resistance.
Yeah. There we go.
That's always the sign. And so I got great encouragement early on, and I got some great opportunities from speakers that I had met along the way in my journey. And so I've just been blessed ever since.
And one more thing to bring out about that whole starting thing, because people listening to this may be thinking about going out on their own. I mean, this is a good roadmap about what, not jumping in with both feet. You, it's not that you backed into it, you took it step by step.
I did.
And
I,
one of the things that I want to go back to was when you first talked with Shep, you did not go in there saying, God, I want this job. Please give me this job. You know, whatever. You said to him, I don't think we may not be a good fit. Good luck to you. And I'm exaggerating here, but good luck to you. Bye. You know, the fact that you did not approach in desperation.
Well, I mean, that's very true because first of all, I didn't think I was a fit. I was not willing to work full time. When we met, I said I would work 9 to 3 when my daughter is in school. I said, this is going to be my only child. I'm going to be homeroom mother every year. I need flexibility. At the time, my mother was having some problems living on her own. And so I had some responsibilities. And we just both kind of said he had never had anyone with my experience worked for him before.
Mm.
And so he said, why don't we give it a try? And I said, well, we'll give it a try. And we both said, if either one of us is unhappy, it'll be like a no fault divorce. We'll
Mm-hmm.
just walk away. But he's a wonderful guy, incredibly smart. I loved the business. I adored him. And so I really lucked into something, Don,
Mm-hmm.
that was never anticipated. And I would tell you today, I never anticipated having my own business. This is not something I ever set out to do, even in my younger days. But it just opportunities presented themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, that 3-ring binder that you have, I wrote that all out in Word on my
Yeah.
compact computer before I ever went out on my own, because I said to myself, if I am going to work with speakers, how could I structure everything that I have? I just did an inventory of everything I knew.
Yeah.
And that was the first iteration of a product that I brought with me when I was consulting.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm on the fly right here, wanting to pull up that first book, because you've got a second edition, but I want to show the first book right
Sure.
now. Let's see, book more business. Should have had this up already, but I actually showed this to somebody earlier today because I was in a group with writers and we were talking about doing updated editions. And so I showed your book as an example of how to keep the connection and yet make it clear that this is a second edition. Okay,
That's
so
exactly what I wanted to do.
yeah, now let's see, Chrome tab, there it is. So this is the book that came from that 3-ring binder.
That's right.
And so what year was this published? Is it
2017.
there it is right there. Okay. And I haven't looked here. I'm not going to scroll down in order to do that. But was that a major publisher, or did you independently publish that?
I used a hybrid publisher for that.
Hybrid. Okay.
And
let's explain, because some of our listeners are writers, some of them aren't. What do we mean by hybrid? I don't think was the term used back then, but it's what would be used now.
I was using it back then because I had a book coach, Kathy Fyack, who is a dear friend of mine. And I told Kathy, I want to write this book. She helped me get it to the marketplace. And I said, I'm not looking for a New York publishing house. I turned down a New York publishing house who had an interest in this because I knew their interest would be very fleeting. And I wasn't going to sell the numbers that they wanted me to sell. And, their interest is about that long.
Right.
So she helped me find a publisher for it. What I wanted to do was write. I said, I want to write the book. I want you to find the editor, the publisher, the everything. And she did. And then when I just did, literally hot off the press, the new edition, I have self-published that totally. I've outsourced most of it, but I went on my own for the second edition.
Okay. And that's, I like to look at that process, because a lot of folks will think, even today, sometimes people will think, oh, self-publishing, that's like vanity publishing, where you pay somebody. And no, that's not what we're talking about. No. This is the marketplace today. And without putting down traditional publishers, the reality is, if you publish through a traditional publisher these days, you still have to do your own marketing. You have to do your own editing.
Listen, this is, when I work with clients who say, I'm thinking about writing a book, my first question when they say that is always this: what do you want to accomplish by writing this book? And if you are looking for big PR, look for a New York publishing house. My sense is, good luck with that. Yeah. Because New York publishing houses right now are looking to publish maybe 10 books a year by sure things. And that's not us. That's not most of us mere mortals. Exactly. And plus, it can take forever to get it to the market.
It's a long time, at least.
It is a long time. Yeah. And, part of the new content in my book is artificial intelligence. Well, how is that evolving? It's evolved so much in the 8 weeks since I published this. But I wasn't willing to wait or go through the process or give up the money for what I have a book that fits a very niche market. And so it made ultimate sense to me. And as I said, their interest in you is very fleeting. And I always say that I'm going to be more interested in my intellectual property than anybody else.
Exactly. And it's, I think for a lot of people who aren't aware of it, they will equate self-publishing with low quality, and that is absolutely not the case. Whether you're talking about the hybrid publisher of your first edition, or as I say, independent publishing, self-publish is a perfectly good term. But because some people think of it as being vanity publishing, I go with
it's a completely different animal.
And I mean, nobody's going to care about it as much as you do. You can get good layout and good editing, good cover design.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Let's go for those who are on with us visually. I'm going to pull up QR code about the books here. This is the latest one. And for those of you who are seeing it visually, and audio listeners, you can go to the show notes at confidencecultivators.com. You can find a video version of this. The cover is the same cover, except that you've added the subtitle, folks. Well, again, for audio listeners, Book More Business, Make Money Speaking was the first edition.
Yes.
Second edition is Book More Business, subtitle Make More Money Speaking.
Yes.
So you've added that more in a little carrot.
Yes.
And we have a blue band at the top there that tells about it being updated. So people are not going to get confused between the editions.
Yeah,
Okay.
I did this purposely. I wanted to keep the look because it's been very successful in my niche market.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I wanted to keep the look, but I wanted to change the subtitle to reflect that it was a different edition. And on the banner, I wanted to put specifically what was different between this and the 2017 edition.
Exactly, because it's making it clear that even if you have the first edition, it's worthwhile getting the second edition.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
for folks who are listening audio only, there's a short link to where you can get to this easily. It's at donking.com. Remember, Don is spelled with two N's, DONNKING.com/book more business. Nice and simple. And that will take you to this latest edition. And this is the latest book, but we also want to mention, along with this one, you mentioned your co-author on another book here that you and Kathy Fayok did earlier, The Speaker Author. Subtitle is Sell More Books and Book More Speeches. And so that's one that you did with Kathy after writing the Book More Business.
I did. We did this in 2019. And it's really all about how do you leverage your speaking to sell books, and how do you leverage your books to sell speeches. And this is something that a lot of speakers want to do and need to do, and it can be a great money stream, income stream, and it can serve your clients really well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I've always found it kind of almost funny that when you're focused on being a professional speaker, they'll say, well, to help that along, write a book. And when you're focused on being an author, they will tell you, well, to help your marketing on the book. So, okay, which is it? And so honestly, I started out thinking of myself as a writer who spoke.
Yeah.
And then I became a speaker who wrote. And now I'm back to being a writer who speaks.
Yeah, it's, it really is true. When you think about this, even if you were with a New York publishing house, as we were saying, you would have limited publicity. You would make very little money on it. Very little money on it.
Yeah.
And my sense is this: if the information that I have in this book can be helpful in my market, people are not caring who published it. And I'll tell you that people do not look at who published these things.
Mm-hmm.
You have to put a good product out there because your name's on it. But as you said, there are resources now that of people who can help you do this and get to the marketplace with your book. There are books that tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
But it's not an impossible job, and it's not that heavy a lifting if you have the basis for the book and there's a market for the book.
Indeed. In the last few years that I was a member of the National Speakers Association, I didn't hear them pushing is the wrong word. Holding this out there as clearly as when I first got into it. But I remember they used to talk about 8 different ways that a speaker could make a living as a speaker. And only one of those was getting on stage directly for a paycheck.
Sure.
There was speaking. A lot of us will know the name Zig Ziglar as sort of the grandfather of the motivational speaking industry. And correct me if I'm wrong, because you knew Zig, but
no, I never knew him. He was a little bit before my time.
Okay,
but
I was making an assumption there then, but
no, he certainly is a recognizable name.
Yeah, and as I heard, I don't know if it's accurate or not, that Zig never charged much at all. As a speaker, he made his money from the books by speaking and then having the table at the back where he sold his books and programs and that kind of thing.
And that's still a business model, Don.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Very viable one.
I'll share with you that the founder of NSA, Cavett Robert, realized early on that you can't make a good enough living just getting on planes and getting off planes. There's a finite amount of time and energy that you can do that with, especially now, but even back then. And when I spoke at the National Center for Professional Speakers for NSA in Tempe, Arizona years ago, I did a program for them, and then I changed in this little room where they kept some artifacts because I wanted to get off the clothes I wore for the presentation. Someone was taking me to the airport. In that room was Cavett Roberts' first product, which was a 33 1/3 record album.
Yeah.
Of a sales rally he did. Now, can you imagine traveling around the country with big record albums? But even he realized that he had to have another income stream other than just being on a platform.
Yeah.
And so I thought, man, that really spoke to me. And I looked at that and I thought, how in the world do you travel with these? But he didn't. He made a lot of money with them.
Well, and I got to wonder just from the logistics if he would do things like ship boxes to where he was going to be speaking, or did he put them in the trunk of his car? I know
don't
Wayne Dyer.
Yeah,
Wayne
that's
Dyer
right.
with his
That's
first
right.
books literally went around with a station wagon.
He did. And he would open the trunk wherever he was.
Yeah, yeah. So the
But,
flip side of this is also true for authors. You're unlikely to make a living, much less a lot of money,
That's right.
just by writing. You know,
Yes.
it's the multiple streams of income, as the saying goes.
It is. I agree. I agree.
So let's also be sure. I'm going to put up on another QR code. This one goes to your website. It says Book More Business, and that is the website, bookmorebusiness.com.
It is.
And so for folks who are interested in seeing what all Lois has, morebusiness.com, should have thought of this already. I'm going to pull up the website once it loads here, because I think it's a really well done website.
Thank you.
Okay, share screen. Lois, there we are. And I mean, this really connects. One of the things people who listen to our program will hear frequently, basically, is the idea of a person as a brand. Because you know there are marketing experts in various things, but people want to work with Lois Creamer because of Lois's particular approach. I think in the age of AI, this is more or less becoming even stronger. That you know, what is it? Whatever skill you're looking for, in a way, it's a commodity. And as Joe Penn says, you know, double down on being human. So, how has that worked for you over the years? Well, I mean, you know, we keep saying NSA, and let's make sure people know NSA is not the government agency. You know, this is National Speakers Association.
That's right. That's right. You know, I think that I totally agree with you. You know, when you're an entrepreneur like I am, or a solopreneur, I am the brand. And so I have a certain reservoir, if you will, of intellectual property. And I think my uniqueness would be my journey to get here, working in a corporate setting. Then I also spoke on sales, and then as a consultant now to professional speakers. I've been in all of these different worlds, but I also come with an opinion. I've been doing this a long time. My market intelligence are my clients who are out there doing this every day. I like to keep my fingers on the pulse of what's going on in the meetings industry. And so I come with an opinion. Don, I often say I'm not just a happy talker. I let people know what I think. I think that that's what they want to hear. If they don't, I'm not going to be a good fit for them. But I do think that your personality comes into it regarding your approach and just kind of the way you do everything. I mean, I consider, you know, my word of the year every year is gratefulness. I am grateful for this business. I get to do what I love to do, and I don't take that for granted at all. I love getting to work with creative, interesting people, and I learn every day from everybody I work with. So I enjoy my journey, and I think that my clients can sense that.
I can testify to that. I want to ask something here because I know it comes up for other writers, it comes up for speakers, and I know you address this very effectively. you on your website, bookmorebusiness.com, your book, Book More Business, Make More Money Speaking, the book you wrote with Kathy Fayok, you put a lot of your knowledge and skill out there in a relatively low cost form, even for free. I mean, you offer on your website 10 questions to ask when you're booking a speech.
Yes.
And just those 10 questions alone are gold. So, how is it then that you make a living charging fees for workshops or charging fees for personal consultation? Because you do and lots of other people do, so what is it? Does this thing we've been talking about the personal connection, it becomes that valuable?
Well, I think it's the personal take that is the valuable thing. I think in an intellectual property business like mine, I have to give away a lot of value in order to gain value.
Hmm.
So I give a lot away. The reason people hire me is that they want that knowledge that I have applied to their specific speech in their specific
Mm.
marketplace and who they specifically should be talking to and what they should say. And so that really, mine is a personal services business, if you will.
Hmm.
And it's taking the things that generally work in this industry, but making sure that they're going to work for you in this industry and how you need to tweak them.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, Lois, you and I could talk for hours. I want to be respectful of your time, though. As we're starting to come to a close, this could lead to several other things, and it's fine if it does. I always like to say I'm always a generalist talking to somebody who is an expert, a specialist in whatever they're on the show talking about. There's probably something that you wish that I had asked about that I didn't. What would that be? And what would your answer be? What else would we like to tell people listening here to the alignment show? And just a little reminder for folks listening as well as for Lois, a lot of the folks who are in our audience, they have realized life is short. You don't want to spend your life doing something you don't want to do. They're figuring out what's important to them. I think you can tell by listening to Lois that she's clear on her values and has shaped her life in order to be able to live her values, to value her life. So, whatever you might want to say to this audience, Lois, either in answer to a question you wish I had asked or something that you think would be useful to somebody who might be facing the fears that you faced as an early business provider. Maybe here's something else. I'll plant this and take it or don't, either way. You've in essence done the same thing in a way for 25 or more
Yes.
years,
Yeah.
but also in a way the speaking industry has been through at least three major shifts that I can identify. So you've had to also constantly change your business. You may have some wisdom to share on either side of that.
Well, the first thing I would want to say is if you are interested in starting your own business, follow your joy. I think life is short. Uh, I have some friends who go to an office every day and resent it.
Mm.
And I'm always reminded how lucky I feel I am, Don. I'm always reminded. Um, I have created a business that helps me to live the kind of life that I want. I mean, I remember when I left corporate and stayed home with my daughter for 10 years, I also drove a 20-year-old car. We never went on vacations. I mean, there are things that you are willing to trade off, and that was no big trade-off to me, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But I think you have to ask yourself, what kind of a lifestyle do you want to create with your business? And I never created this business to be gone from my home, for example. Nowadays, we have even more ways, more dynamic ways of reaching audiences like you and I are doing right now, virtual and audio.
Yeah.
COVID, as a terrible time of loss that it was, one of the blessings that came out of it for speakers was Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to speak virtually. I don't travel as much as I used to because I don't want to. I do a lot of Zoom presentations. I'm doing one tomorrow for a Professional Speakers Association in England. And it's pretty easy peasy. I might be doing it at dark 30 in the morning for me, but I'm not having to get on a plane or go to an airport. I just went up and did a program in person for the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers in Montreal, spent 13 hours in airports trying to get back to St. Louis, where I live. And it was a reminder to me why I like the virtual option a lot now. But I do think that you have to realize this. When you want to do something, I realized early on that if I wanted to be successful doing this, I was going to have to create some discipline around how I ran my business. And I really have been in sales all my life. I came with some great sales training. I would tell anybody who's going to sell a service like speaking or consulting, you better get good at selling, because you'll only get an opportunity if someone buys what you're selling. And then you have to evolve as the world evolves and as your market evolves. As you mentioned, we've had some really peaks and valleys over the years. I remember after 9/11, nobody wanted to travel.
Right.
Meetings were canceled. In 2008, the economy fell through and people were losing jobs. And the first thing people wrote off were meetings and speakers. And then COVID, you can only imagine, speakers, calendars were wiped clean. Everyone had to evolve and adapt. And we've learned some important lessons from that. You learn lessons each time I think you survive these kinds of things, Don. And I certainly have learned. And I have created my business around the way I like to do business. Now, I have a little bit more flexibility now to do that than I did when I started, and I needed every client and every job. I'm a little pickier now that I'm gray, but I really think that you want to be crystal clear about the choices that you make, and that you can live joyfully and gratefully in those decisions that you make. Don't rush into things, but don't be fearful about trying anything. I remember when I started this business, I said to my husband and myself, if I'm not making money in 12 months, I'll just go work for somebody else. The worst case scenario was I would work for somebody else, which I had been doing for years. So that would have been okay with me. But I think my biggest regret would have been if I had never tried this. And I think that I would have regretted that. And so I realized that the risk wasn't failing. The risk to me was not trying. So that's kind of has been my approach and the lessons that I've learned over the years in my own business.
That's a valuable lesson. Completely separate from that, this question occurred to me just moments ago. Before we get off here, for somebody who is familiar with the first edition of Book More Business, 2017, I'm at the age where 2017 doesn't seem that long ago.
It seems like yesterday to me.
And yeah, it's like yesterday, and yet there have been so many changes.
Yes.
In those 7 years. Am I doing the math right? 8 years?
Yes.
What would you say is probably I'm struggling with a question here, Lois. I don't want to assume one way or the other. I've read both books, but I couldn't tell you right now if the second one was completely rewritten or if you just added chapters.
It was completely rewritten. There wasn't a chapter that went untouched.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought, but I just wasn't sure. So what would you say would be the biggest thing about the second edition?
The biggest thing about the second edition was my looking back at my 2017 edition, realizing the word virtual was not in that book. With the advent of virtual programming, more and more people are recording speeches, whether you're doing it virtually or it's a hybrid event, an in-person and virtual, or just in person. More and more people are recording it. So I wanted to write about virtually, how do I control the value of my intellectual property in a virtual situation? How can I make money by licensing extended use of the videos that my clients are taking of me? How can I maintain control of that intellectual property? And then AI has changed everything in the speaking industry. It's changed for content creators. It's changed as far as how we research. It's even changed how we prospect for clients. So I knew that I had to address these things that had happened. And in a relatively short period of time, when you think 2017 to now, that's a lot of profound change
Hmm.
that has come between now and then. And I remember sitting at a meeting with a friend of mine, and we were listening to an AI presenter, and I had just turned over the final edit, the final copy to my editor for the final edit. And I was thinking, I got to get it back because I want to include something I just heard. And I realized I've got to stop somewhere.
Hmm.
Artificial intelligence is changing daily for us. But my book gives you some good ideas about how you're going to use it. So it's profoundly changed. The industry has profoundly changed, even in just these last 7 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, dare I ask what's next for Lois Creamer?
Well, what's next is an audiobook. I'm creating an audiobook from this that will be up on in the Amazon marketplace. I'm not going to give you a time because I'm not sure yet when,
Right. Right.
but it will be up. I hope by the end of the first quarter this year. And I'm considering a workbook, a companion workbook to go along with this book. I'm still mulling all these things over, but those are a couple projects that I have on the front burner right now.
Very good. Very good. Well, Lois, we will draw things to a close. Is there any last bit of wisdom you would like to share?
The only thing that I would tell people is I hope you have as much fun on your journey as I've had on mine.
Excellent.
Uh, and as I said, I feel like the luckiest person on the face of the earth to get to do what I really love to do. And my wish is for everybody to be able to feel that way. And if you're thinking there's something that you want to do, plan it out a little bit. Don't be afraid to take a risk and ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen? And it might not be quite as scary as you think it is.
Makes a lot of sense. We're very lucky to have you with us here on the Alignment Show. So thank you for being here.
Don, honored to be with you, and it's always good to see you, my friend.
Wow. 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 I just can't tell you how pleased I am that we've been able to have this conversation. Um, Lois described herself a couple of times with a niche business, and indeed, in fact, that's one of the advantages of the way she does things. Her marketing is basically addressing chapters of the National Speakers Association. But at the same time, her experience and her insights are so universally useful to people who are seeking to serve the needs of clients. And so I'm just so happy that we got to have this conversation. So as we are wrapping things up today, there are a number of things I could reflect on here. I would encourage you to go back through the episode, take notes, check out her resources. Remember that you can get show notes at confidencecultivators.com. We've had that crawl on the screen for our video folks. But we also want to make sure the audio folks know how to get to it as well. So confidencecultivators.com. And this is episode 80. So you can always go to donking.com/80 to be able to see the show notes and look at the video again, listen to the audio. A couple other things as we're wrapping up here. Be sure and share this episode with a friend. Somebody who's thinking about starting a business or somebody who's struggling in a business. There's going to be something useful here. Subscribe to the show notes, confidencecultivators.com. Subscribe so that you make sure you know about upcoming guests. You can get the show notes each time. If you want to support the show, you can go to Buy Me a Coffee. I'll put that link in the show notes as well. But Buy Me a Coffee /Don King, I think is what the setup is. And for whatever it's worth, I work with a limited number of people to help them bring their book into publication. That's not a main thing that I'm doing. I don't have time to do that much, but with select people, if you are thinking about doing that independent publishing thing, then it might be worthwhile for us to have a conversation. In any case, Next week, I'm not 100% sure who our guest will be, but I can guarantee you that it's going to be a conversation worth listening to. It's going to help you to live your values and value your life. So whether it's next week or the week after, folks who are new to the program, they say consistency is always important in podcasting. Because I am a caregiver of a disabled daughter, and my wife is also partially disabled, the reality of my life is that there are a lot of people who have veto power over my plans. So I say these days I am consistently inconsistent. That's one of the reasons to subscribe, so that when we have material, then you have it available to you. But whether it's next week or the week after, we will have a good conversation for you. I want to say to you, thank you for being here with us on the Alignment Show. We will see you next time. That's it for this week's episode of the Alignment Show. What has it inspired you to do in your own life? Whatever it is, take action now and take the first step. It will help you to talk with a friend about what you're thinking. Share confidencecultivators.com to spread the goodness. And remember to live your values and value your life. We will see you next week on The Alignment Show.